All right, we're going to go back to our original discussion before we got distracted by a very interesting discussion about can you steal from non-Jews, and that led us to that whole discussion about the borders of ethical values. But I'm not going to go back. You can go back and watch it on YouTube if you want to review the discussion. But we were talking, if you remember, about the responsibilities of employers to employees. Specifically, it was feeding the employees, and the discussion that we were going through before we got waylaid was this allowing your agricultural employees that would have been just about everybody in those days, but that was the biggest industry, agriculture, allowing your farm workers to eat the produce while they're on the job. So that was the discussion: how much can they eat, and what are the limitations? So we're on that topic right now. We're on 176. And I'll just remind everybody, just as I mentioned before, it's all based on some very generous passages in the Torah, which say that for sure you have to allow anybody that goes through your field to eat whatever they want. And actually what the rabbis do is they narrow that to just people that are working for you, and just working for you at a particular time, at a particular job. And still they're going to narrow it more. Although I think from our perspective, it's still going to seem very generous that just a worker can eat whatever they want on the job. All right, page 176, and it's verse 7. V'achalta. Okay, so the verse says that they can eat v'lo motzetz. So they can eat, but they can't suck. So this like referring maybe to grapes, like you can pop them to your mouth. But I think I was trying to figure out, I mean, since they're trying to limit what the worker can do, I mean, sucking is kind of relishing. You can't like take your time and just suck out all the juice. Just, you're hungry, you eat a grape, go on, you keep working. But you can't just stay there sucking on the grapes like that and getting the juice out and relishing the taste of it. Anavim, so you can, now the Torah is talking about grapes in a vineyard, but it's clearly referring to everything. You're meant to extrapolate to all crops, but it says the anavim, the grapes, velo anavim vidavar acher. Okay, so you can't eat the produce and with something else. And referring here is to a condiment. You can't like put sugar on them to make them taste even better. So they're trying to avoid that you're just going to sit there and eat because it'll be too good. You won't be able to stop yourself. Okay, so just you eat the produce itself. Don't add to the produce. Don't sit down and make a meal out of it. You're hungry, you take a grape, you take a peach, whatever. Okay, now it goes off into, so there's just this one. You noticed after all these years the style of the Talmud, which is very discursive. It changes the subject very quickly. So we'll be changing the subject a bit to some of the laws of tithing, which are really, from our perspective, the laws of taxation. What's taxed income and what's not, all because they decide to spend some time on one word. Here's the one word. Kinafshecha. So the Torah says kinafshecha means eat as much as you desire, your nefesh, your soul, as much as your soul desires. But kinefesh shel balabait. Okay, so that means eat as much as you desire. We would read that as referring to the worker, as much as the worker desires. But actually the rabbis here are reading it as much as you, the owner, because the verse is actually addressing the owner, so that your worker is allowed to eat as much as you would desire. So it's already kind of interesting. It's saying that your appetite is the same as their appetite, because you might think that you're a rich guy, you've got a bigger appetite than this guy, but they're saying that don't make that mistake. They've got an appetite too. However, and that we're going to come back to that, but that's not the direction it's going to take us, just at least for a few minutes. I don't know. Kinefesh shel balabait, that it's you compare the appetite to the appetite of the owner. Kach nafsho shel poel. That's also the appetite of the worker. All right, now we come up with an halachic statement, which is going to lead us to an interesting halachic discussion. Page 177. Ma nafshecha ochel v'fatur. Just as in fulfilling your appetite. Okay, talking about the owner. The owner is walking through his field, just inspecting, maybe doing a little work himself. God forbid he should do work himself. That's why he hires people. But he's kind of walking through his field. He's curious about his field, and and he eats a grape or two. Now the thing is that's produce. All produce is taxable, meaning it goes to the priest. It's all subject to tithe. So once you pluck it and you put it in your mouth, that's actually income to you. So the question is, does the owner have to pay a tithe on the food that he's eating in the field? before he gathers it and takes it to sell. So the answer is no. The answer is like you're walking through the field, that's tax-free. I get to eat whatever I want there. That's what they say, ochel ufatur. If you're eating it yourself as the owner in the field, ach nafsho shel poel, ochel ufatur. The same thing with what the worker eats in the field, you can eat, and he's therefore exempt from taxing. So it's an interesting question. I think we touched on it quickly a couple of weeks ago, is the food that the worker eats while on the job, is that taxable income? Is that, because after all, it is income, right? I mean, he's eating. What income in the grossest sense? Well, you make an income so you can feed yourself. But if you're feeding yourself on the job, is that taxable income? So the Talmud here come out and says no. How do we know? Because we've already decided that the owner doesn't have to pay tax on the stuff that he's eating. So and we have already this verse that compares the owner's appetite to the worker's appetite. So therefore, the worker also, it's not taxable income. Okay. Was there a question? Okay. Now we're going to go on, but we're going to come back to that. All right, savecha. Okay. So now the verse says that you eat your fill. So you eat according to your appetite, and you eat your fill. Okay. And now the Talmud says velo achila gasa. So not more than your fill. You can't eat like a chazer if you're a worker, right? You can't stuff yourself. Right. Don't take advantage. You just eat. Yeah. So so again, it's a responsibility of the worker not to overdo this generous allotment, this benefit. Okay. I'm going to go on. Again, quoting the verse. Ve'el kel yecha lo titain. We've had this before. You can't put it in your own bucket. Okay? That's the pshat of the verse. The pshat of the verse is you're going through the field. You can't have your own little private bucket to take it home to your grandchildren, or your kids. And of course, that it seems to me would be taxable if you're taking it home. But it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do it anyway. But they expand that in an act of creative exegesis with the following. Bisha'ah sha'ata noten lekelav shel bal habayit. So they're saying that all this only applies when you're on the job, taking produce and putting into the bucket of the owner, the bal habayit. In other words, when you're picking produce, when you're in the act of picking fruit, then you can eat what you want. Ata ochel. Bisha'ah she'ata noten lekelav. If you're working in the field, but you're not picking and putting it into a bucket, shel bal habayit, that for the owner, iyata ochel. At that point, you're not allowed to take whatever you want. So there's other jobs in the field, right? There's weeding, there's fertilizing, there's planting seeds. The only time that you're free to eat whatever you want is when you're actually in the act of picking, and no other time. Which is interesting because, of course, that's when you're going to be most. I think that's right. You're most tempted. So the Torah here, or the Talmud here, is actually understanding human nature. It's very hard to pick 20,000 blueberries a day and not taste one or two. So of course you allow the person to taste as many as you want, as long as you're not being a glutton about it. But if you're in the field doing other things, then you don't just eat blueberries because you're not as tempted. And there has to be a limit. It doesn't belong to you. You're being paid to do the work. All right. Any questions? Okay. A little bit more. All right, so now we're going back to this, I think, a fairly interesting, if you're a tax lawyer. If you're not a tax lawyer, it may not be so interesting, but but just a question about how you pay tithes. What do you pay tithes on? Which, from our point of view, is what income is taxable. Amar Rabbi Yaneh, Eina tevel. All right, so we have, first of all, to learn a Talmudic word here, a phrase, tevel. The word tevel is income before it's taxed, or it's crops before it's tithed. Tithe is tenth, pre-tithe, right? It's pre-tithe. And it's called tevel. Tevel is just a mass of produce that you haven't separated yet for the priests and non-priests. Okay. Eina tevel mitchayev maaser. So this produce doesn't become liable to be tithe. Ad. Now you turn the page 178. We just went through 2 pages. We've never gone through 2 pages that quickly. And I don't know if that's because I'm going too fast or your eyes are glazing over, but it's a rapid clip suddenly. Okay, page 178. So it doesn't become liable to tithe. Ad sheyareh pnei habayit, till you bring it into the house. Okay, so the idea is that the worker puts it in barrels or boxes. Containers, and then you take it all to the house. At the house, the big house, then maybe you're going to sell it there. Maybe you're also a merchant, Or, more likely, if you're a bigger operation, merchants are going to come and pay wholesale, and then they're going to go and they're going to sell it in their stores. But in any case, you don't have to tithe it until it goes from the field. The field is not tithed until it goes to the house. Now, that seems like some common sense because, as we said, in the field, there's all sorts of things that can happen. I mean, the workers are going to be eating it, and maybe the workers even take a little bit from the box, and that's okay because they're still got that job of picking the produce. Or you as an owner, you're going to eat a little bit, just you want to taste it, or you're hungry as you're inspecting your fields. So there's too much that can happen in the field, but once it's in the house, it's taxable, and then you do the tithing. Yeah.
It also might spoil on the way from the field to the house.
Spoil, exactly. Right, so then it's no good for you as income. Right, okay. Now, the main reason is because you have, all that is common sense reason. Another reason is you have the word bayit in the actual commandment to tithe. Okay.
There's another dimension to this, and it takes the onus off of the worker in terms of theft, because it doesn't say it directly, but by virtue of the fact that he can do it and still not penalized, he's allowed to do it.
Right.
It's not classified as
income. Yeah. Well, another thing I thought you were going to say, I think you're implying this also, is that in the field it's easier for theft to happen. Exactly the workers and the owner shouldn't have to pay tax.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's not taxable income until it comes to the house. And then you can count on it as a source of income. Whereas in the field, you can't actually count that on a source of income. I think also, like you said, I mean, it could be spoiled. Like if it's in the house and it's spoiled, you're not going to count it as a source of income. Or it could be stolen in the field, and that's not fair. Then it's going to be counted as a source of income, but then it's going to be stolen. So you can't depend on it till it comes into the house.
Right.
The owner can also barter it before it comes in the house.
Well, that would be cheating, though.
Barrels of corn can trade them to somebody for cow or something.
So we're going to get to that. Yeah. No, that's a giant. So I was going to wait till we got to it, but you mentioned it. It's a giant loophole.
Yeah, sure.
If you think of it as a loophole, and a good tax lawyer is going to say, well, all you need to do is do all your business in the field. Just don't bring it in the house.
Yes.
Tell your buyers to come to the field, have them buy it there in the field, and then you don't have to pay any taxes on it. I mean, so that's a giant loophole. Yeah. And then the thing is that for us, we could say, okay, we'll change the law. For the rabbis, they've got the Torah. The Torah's got the word bayit, which we're going to get to in a second. But of course, with a little creative exegesis, you can get around that. But you're right. I mean, you've identified a loophole there. Is that just okay? If it's not the field that's taxable, it's just stuff in the house. Let's keep everything as much as we can in the field. Yeah.
I think there may be a little conflict of interest. It's the beneficiaries of this tax for people who are writing these laws.
That's not true, actually. They're not. It's not, no, because it's the priests that are the beneficiaries.
Right.
It's not the rabbis. Most rabbis weren't priests.
They didn't have priests at the time.
So there weren't any beneficiaries at the time. You didn't tithe in the, but when they were writing this, you didn't actually tithe. So.
Is the house the storage site? Is it like the barn?
Yeah, I think it's more like the barn. It's more like the barn. It's not. Yeah, it's not like your living room. Yeah.
Actually, what it means is taking possession.
It's taking possession. Yeah. When is it really? I mean, that's why. I mean, without getting into loopholes. I mean, this goes to show that the human mind is always going to find tax loopholes. It's one of the certainties of the human mind. So of course, we in this class figured it out right away. I mean, right. So first of all, so you've got the conception. The conception is, as you just said, when you take ownership. So then, of course, the human mind is going to try to find the loophole and say, okay, well, before I actually technically take ownership, I'm going to try to sell a little on the side so I don't have to pay taxes. But you're right. So somewhere when you're paying taxes, you have to figure out when do I own it so it becomes a benefit to me. And then once you make that decision, then, of course, the tax lawyers are going to figure out then what's the loophole here. And then it's a game. It's a game between people making the laws and people that are trying to get around the laws. Yeah.
Well, when produce is still out in the field, just natural causes can decrease the amount of produce available. Okay, so there could be animals, it could be rain, it could be wind, it could be whatever.
Right. Much less indoors.
Correct.
Right.
So you could have different kinds of problems indoors.
Right.
But then it's easier. What if you measure as soon as you bring it indoors, you know a specific amount. Out in the field, you don't.
Right. I think that's a really good point, and that also speaks to the reality of their situation. Which is a big difference between indoors and outdoors. Yes. Okay, let's keep going.
Does
Oh yeah.
the Talmud make a distinction between following the rule, the letter of the law versus the intention of the law? Does Talmud, is it a virtue to follow the intention of law or not?
Oh, well, it certainly comes up. I haven't seen it in this discussion, but that comes up a lot in the Talmud. Yeah. I mean, going beyond the letter of the law. It's considered a great ethical value, going beyond the letter of the law. So even though the Torah might allow you this loophole, it's lifnim mishurat hadin, which lifnim mishurat hadin. The shurat hadin is the line of the law, going beyond it even, yeah. Well, it means that even though, according to this, I can get around it by selling my stuff outdoors. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go beyond that because it's the right and ethical thing to do, and it's an important principle in the Talmud. Okay, because you're always going to find a loophole. I mean, that's a clever mind is always going to find a loophole. So now they quote the verse Shenemar bi'arti kodesh min habayit. So it actually refers to a lovely passage in the Torah. During tithing, there's a formula that you recite. It's interesting because I just had this discussion last night with somebody that it's very rare that we think of paying our taxes as being something that's ceremonial and an act of great patriotism. Yeah. We could. I mean, when you go to vote, there's still people that feel like that's a great act of patriotism. I mean, my wife and I still actually get sort of teary when we go and vote, because it's, you're a citizen, and a lot of places don't have that you're allowed to just vote for our leaders, and you can kick out your leaders. So sometimes there's civic acts which fill you with a sense of pride. It's great to be here. It's great to be an American. But paying your taxes is really not one in our culture. Now it could be, right? I mean, theoretically, it could be because you're supporting your country, and it's like when you write a check to Jewish Family Service or Congregation Bethel, as a wild example. I mean, you could feel good about that because you're part of the community. You feel like you're a partner in the growth of the institution that you believe in. And most people don't feel that way about taxes. On the contrary, even the most patriotic people want to pay less. So so when you have tithing in the Torah accompanies the act of tithing with a ceremony where you're meant to feel good about it and actually be part of the culture and be part of the society. So you recite this formula saying, I remember we were back in Egypt and we left Egypt and God rescued us. And out of a sense of gratitude to that, I am giving this tithe. So you say, imagine if that was required. Couldn't make it required though, but imagine if that was part of our paying the taxes. If I were the head of IRS, it'd be a very bad idea. But if I were head of IRS, I would suggest that. I would say, let's make people feel good about paying their taxes. But the Torah has this formula that you're supposed to recite, and it is that I have fulfilled my obligation and paid my taxes from my bayit. So they have the word bayit, the house. That's how we know that you pay the taxes once the produce gets into the bayit, not when it's out in the field. But it's part of this recitation that's in the book of Deuteronomy.
Surprising there wasn't a prayer about taxes.
Yeah, right. There should be. Well, there's may God keep our taxes far away from us, right? Yeah, it's like similar to the blessing to the czar too, which also was not a very patriotic blessing if you think about it. Right? Yeah. All right. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Afila Chatzer Kovad. So Rabbi Yochanan says it's not just the house itself; it's the courtyard. Yeah, so and the courtyard actually is actually still outside, but maybe there's walls or there's fences or yeah, it's an assembly point, right? I mean, if you can't get it into the barn, maybe your barn's not big enough, or it's actually your house. So Rabbi Yochanan says it's the courtyard, but he has a verse, the Shenemar, the Achlu b'sha'arecha v'saveu, because of actually it's a different verse. Well, actually no, it's from the same recitation that you've eaten after the harvest, it's been brought into your courtyard, and then you were satisfied. So that's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan suggesting that it should be the courtyard. Okay, so now we go back and forth on who's right. Is it the house or is it the courtyard? And it says Rabbi Yochanan nami haktiv min habayit. But Rabbi Yochanan has the same Torah that we've got, and it says in the Torah there in that passage that it should be the bayit. So what would Rabbi Yochanan respond to? Rabbi Yochanan at the point is not alive to answer himself. Yeah. He's a third generation rabbi in the land of Israel, and but they're saying, well, he's got that Torah too. How would he respond? Amar lach, he would say to you, right? I mean, that happens a lot in the Talmud too, where you have to speak on behalf of Rabbi Yochanan. We have his opinion. We're trying to understand it, so we put words in his mouth. So he would say to you, Amar lach, chatzer dumiyah debayit. He would just say that the courtyard is in fact an extension of the house. It's part of the house. And he says it in this way. he actually defines it. Ma bayit hamishtamer, av chatzer mishtamer. Just as you would guard your house. If you're going to guard your house, if you're going to have a lock in your house, if you're going to have armed guards around your house, you're not going to have them just in your house because you've got valuable stuff in your courtyard, in your front yard. So therefore, in the sense that you're going to protect your house, the courtyard is part of the house. Okay? That's an interesting way of connecting the courtyard to the house. Okay. So therefore, the courtyard is part of the house. When you say house, you mean courtyard. Page 179. Well, Rabbi Yanai says it's just the house. Hakati bisharecha, but he's got the same Torah as us, and he has to explain. How does he explain the verse gate? And gate there means courtyard. Okay, here's how he explains it. Hahumi baye le. You need that. The ma'el le derech hashar lapuke derech ganot v'karpe pot dilo. Okay, now his explanation is going to open up another loophole. A very big loophole too for tax purposes. So it says the reason that you have the gate which goes through the courtyard is not in fact to tell us about the courtyard at all. It tells us that produce that's liable for tithing is produce that comes in through the gate, that you bring in through the gate. The large gate of the ranch or the estate, that's the produce that gets taxed, as opposed to produce that comes in through the roof or through the back door. That you don't have to pay taxes for. So of course your lawyer is saying right away, well, don't bring anything through the gate. Bring it all through the roof. Now the reality of the Talmud is you can't bring very much in through the roof, and I'm not even sure how it works. Maybe your daughter picked a couple grapes and then she comes back into her bedroom and she's not bringing them through the big employee entrance. She's just coming through the backyard, or she's coming through the roof. So you shouldn't have to pay taxes on that. It's very little that comes through the roof or through the back door. The business stuff comes through the gate. And in some ways they're telling us that you only get taxed on the stuff that you're using for your business purposes, and that's what comes through the front gate, which is the place of business, not through the other entrances of your house, which really aren't the places of business. So that's Rabbi Yanai, but as I said before, it does open up loopholes, because everyone's going to want to then bring it through the entrances that aren't taxed rather than the entrance that is taxed. Yeah.
What does nami mean?
Also, nami means also. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we're going to play around with that also, and just all these possibilities of loopholes and what gets taxed, what doesn't. So we have a little more time today. Metiv. So an objection. Rav Chanina Chozah. Rav Chanina the seer. That's an unusual name for a rabbi in the Talmud, Chozah, and it may just have been his last name. Just somewhere along the line there was or his designation, because it means how does I'm not even sure of Be Chozia. Anyhow, but the word Chozah means the seer. Kinafshecha, kach nafsho shel poel. Okay, so this is the idea that just as the worker doesn't have to pay tax on the little stuff that he eats, well, actually it's the other way around. Just as the owner doesn't have to pay tax on stuff that's in the field, the worker doesn't either. Ma nafshecha ochel fatur, ach nafsho shel poel ochel ufatur. The worker doesn't have to pay taxes. Now it says ha lokea chaya, but we know that is a buyer that buys does have to pay taxes. Okay, so let's say, so remember, you've got the farmer and you've got the merchant, right? Just the guy that owns a store. So he's going to go to your field, he's going to purchase stuff, and he purchases 100 barrels of wheat. That wheat now is a source of income for him because he's going to sell it. Okay, he's got to tithe that, right? It's not only farmers that have to tithe. So this is the expansion of the tithing. So I mean, a lot of a lot of tax conservatives are going to object to this and say this is income that gets taxed twice, right? That shouldn't, right? We hate that, right? It gets like capital gains tax, right? It gets taxed twice. So let me finish the thought. So if you're a merchant and you buy it, and we know that's a given here. That merchant has to tithe. Okay, what were you gonna say?
What does he tithe on the gross value? He buys 100 bushels.
Yeah.
Does he have to tithe 100 bushels, or does he have to tithe only on the profit?
No, he has to tithe on the bushels himself. So he has to give a tenth. Yeah.
Well, that is double dipping. Then.
It is. Yeah. But here's what the Talmud's going to say. My la b'sadeh. That guy might just come to the field and buy it in the field. So they're actually this is that big loophole. They're saying the reality could be that the buyer comes and buys it in the field. Now we know he has to pay tax on it. He has to tithe on it. But this gives the farmer tax-free income because he's buying it in the field. So they're pointing out that loophole and wondering how do we get around that.
And the buyer negotiates a better price because he knows he's
Right,
going to be
right,
taxed on it.
right.
No wonder the IRS is so big.
Okay.
You have a market economy, meaning that people bring things
But
to
it is
market.
big.
Yeah.
So
It may
where's
be
the
shrinking,
tax
but it
go
is big.
there?
Not
Or
big
is there
enough.
a tax on it? Is that?
What do you
same
mean
as
brings-
being in the field? Yeah, there's a market, a lot of economies are based on a market days, and people bring.
Oh yeah.
Bring their things to market.
Well, somehow they have to get between the field and the market. Do they go right from the field to the market? As soon as they bring it to the market, then if it's the farmer that's selling it, it's not till it gets to the market that they actually tithe. So they would tithe right there.
Okay.
Yeah, in those big markets. All right, Amar Rav Papa. Hacha beteina. In that case, we're only talking about figs. Okay. Let's go on page 180, and then we'll stop here. Okay. It's figs. So imagine a fig tree. Can you imagine a fig tree? You know a fig tree? Okay. Haomedet bagina. It's growing in an orchard. Okay. Vinofa notelechatzer askinan. But the fruit is actually moving. It's actually inclining into the courtyard, and the courtyard is where you pay taxes on it. Okay. Ulamandamar bait. Okay, and all right, so there's two ways of looking at it. One is if it's leaning out into the courtyard, then it's leaning out into the courtyard. So it doesn't matter if the buyer comes and buys it there in the field. In fact, what you could say is that he's buying it and it's already in the courtyard. So he's got to pay taxes on it, and the owner has to pay taxes on it, even though it's in the field. It's not a huge field, and for that particular case, it's figs that are growing in the field itself. But the branches are leaning out into the. We had this a couple of weeks ago too. So if the apple is actually in your house, but it's growing in your neighbor's, there are some people that say that you get to take it. But this is saying that since in this case the crop is actually already leaning into the courtyard. By the way, this is kind of weak because I just want to say it's a weak argument because there's going to be all sorts of crops like wheat or whatever that aren't leaning into the courtyard. But they're just trying to understand why there'd be this big loophole. And the answer is that, okay, well, there's going to be some crops that lean over into the courtyard. And since they lean over into the courtyard, and maybe they're going to extrapolate and say all crops could potentially lean over into the courtyard. So the owner, in fact, does have to pay taxes, does have to tithe, even though they're in the field.
Everything has to be harvested as opposed to being on the.
I guess that's a better way of saying it. I mean, sometimes you get stuck on a word because the word's in the Torah. And the Torah says that has the word bayit. The Torah says that you do it in the house. And rather than deal with abstract principles, which we've mentioned here, when you're done harvesting, when it's marketable, when it becomes profitable, that's what we would say. Yeah. Unfortunately, so that the rabbis themselves have to stick with this one very concrete word. So then they have to kind of interpret everything as applying to this concrete word, which is, and now we even expand the word to include the courtyard, but it's crops that overhang into the courtyard, so therefore all crops are liable for taxes. So in other words, don't think you can get out of it just by selling things in the field. By selling things in the field, we're assuming they've made it to the courtyard already. That's kind of the answer there. Okay, we're going to stop here.